The detective could instantly catch details that others overlooked. He walked straight outside instead, while everyone else was investigating inside the house, because he noticed the window at the crime scene was open. An ordinary killer wouldn't dare to be that bold. He crossed to the opposite side of the street. Inside an empty house stood only a single chair, and the chair was still warm. He instantly realized this was the vantage point of the twisted serial killer. When he sat down, he realized it offered a perfect view of the entire crime scene. A few minutes ago, he had been sitting here watching the police investigate. Nick returned to the crime scene and found that the fridge had been broken for at least half a month. The landlord told him the girl had called a repair company before her death, but they never showed up. It seemed the killer was likely one of the repairmen. Shop owner said the appointment for that address had been canceled. He secretly canceled the appointment first, then entered the girl's home to commit the crime. Nick took the list of all the repairmen and soon zeroed in on one man. The man was arrogant. When Nick followed him, he got caught. The man even stopped on purpose and invited Nick for a ride. That really made Nick furious. That night, when the man came out to take out the trash, Nick took the chance to rummage through it. He found a half-eaten slice of pizza. He immediately took it to the forensic lab. From the bite marks on it, the coroner said they looked very similar to the victims, but it couldn't be used as direct evidence. Nick brought the man back to the station and interrogated him, but to his surprise, in the interrogation room, the man remained just as arrogant. When the police showed him photos from the crime scene and asked him to identify them, he calmly admired each one like he was enjoying artwork. Nick knew the man was probably the killer, but there was nothing he could do. Enraged, Nick slammed him against the wall. Luckily, the chief pulled him away in time. The man only laughed even more wildly. He knew the police couldn't touch him. If they had direct evidence, they would have arrested him already. Instead of bringing him in for questioning, they had no choice but to release him, because they didn't have a search warrant. So Nick and Detective Jimmy made a plan to sneak into the man's house to find evidence. That night, the man went to the nearby bar as usual. The operation began with Jimmy keeping watch, while Nick picked the lock and slipped inside, quietly sneaking in. But the place was unusually spotless. Not a single trace of crime anywhere, except for a hidden compartment beneath the floor. Inside were newspapers from a serial killing 15 years ago, preserved like a collection by the man. Just then, sirens blared outside. The man had already found out about them and used the bar's phone to call the police. Nick had broken into a private residence. If caught, he could go to jail. Jimmy rushed to stall for time. By the time the police broke in, Nick had vanished. He had secretly climbed onto the roof. Jimmy looked at the man beside him and instantly realized he'd been played. Later, he picked Nick up. Nick gave a detailed report of what he found inside. Jimmy asked if he had found a red hair clip, something the latest victim had lost. Unfortunately, Nick hadn't found it. The next day, they returned near the man's house, but the man was already on guard, so he acted completely normal. The two kept watch until nightfall. Nick suggested grabbing a cup of coffee, then got out and went into a convenience store. Once Nick went inside, Jimmy stepped out to stretch his legs, but then he saw the man getting into his car. But unexpectedly, the man suddenly invited Jimmy to get in, saying he'd take him to the missing girl's body. Wanting to solve the case quickly, Jimmy didn't hesitate and got in. Luckily, Nick saw them leave. They arrived at an empty field. The man handed Jimmy a shovel, saying the body was buried right under his feet. Without a word, Jimmy started digging. All he wanted was evidence to bring the man to justice. But after all that digging, he found nothing. The man claimed he must be remembered wrong, then pointed to another spot. Jimmy grew furious, but struggled to keep his composure. After several more attempts, Jimmy was exhausted and broken. Then the man said he'd never killed anyone. If you don't believe me, keep digging. Though Jimmy knew he was being toyed with, he still refused to give up. But the man kept taunting him, even insulting Jimmy's family. Jimmy finally snapped and swung the shovel in rage. The man collapsed instantly. Jimmy froze and went to check. The guy wasn't breathing anymore. Nick arrived just then. Seeing the scene before him, he suddenly recalled his own past. 5 years ago, during a pursuit, Nick had accidentally shot an innocent girl and was reassigned to a rural patrol because of it. Nick knew Jimmy hadn't meant to kill the man, so he decided to cover it up. He told the sheriff to dig a hole and bury the body, then leave the rest to him. He went to the man's house, packed up all his belongings, and staged it to look like he fled out of guilt. After handling everything, Nick returned to the site, told Jimmy to take some time off, and to never tell anyone about what happened. Half a month passed in a flash, but Jimmy was still haunted by guilt. One day, he received a letter from Nick. Inside was the missing girl's red hair clip. Jimmy instantly realized the man really was the killer, and his soul finally found peace. But was that really the truth? Meanwhile, as Nick burned the man's belongings, he tossed in a pack of newly bought hair clips, except one red clip was missing. Perhaps Nick only wanted to redeem the mistake Jimmy couldn't undo, or maybe he was seeking redemption for himself. The truth seemed settled, but the moment that red hair clip disappeared, it became blurred once again.